Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's the Fat Man coming at you. Um, and today we're going to be talking about CERN. I had recently encountered a friend of mine. I kind of thought everybody had heard of the Mandela effect by now, and a friend of mine had not. So I made an earlier video that kind of was like the Mandela effect, like an introduction to it, and I sent him that link then. And then I did another video, and in that one it was sort of like, here's a bunch of famous Mandela effects. And I kind of wrapped that video up by saying CERN has been filming these weird videos of like people dancing. It's their employees there, and they're dancing around and they're holding these homemade signs, and they hold them up, and each one just has like what would seem like a random thing on it. Like one is Darth Vader, and one of them is whatever, the Tin Man from the Wizard of Oz, that kind of thing. And for people in the Mandela community, they know Darth Vader is part of the Mandela effect because we remember him saying, Luke, I am your father. And that has changed to no, I am your father. In the case of the Wizard of Oz, there's a bunch of Mandela effects there, like with the Tin Man. Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm thinking of the Scarecrow. The Scarecrow has a gun now. Like through the whole movie, he's just walking around with a handgun, and it's very strange, and most people don't remember that at all, don't feel like he should have had that. But the point is, so these things keep popping up at CERN, and it's they have a brochure when you take a tour of CERN. They got one for kids, and in the margins they have all the Mandela effects there. So there's a little cartoon of Darth Vader, and there's a little cartoon of the Scarecrow, and the mirror on the wall thing, like that's referenced in the brochure. So a lot of people think CERN is doing something to cause the Mandela effect, that they're the ones behind it. And something people get particularly weirded out about is there's a statue of the Hindu god Shiva, which is also called the god of destruction, that is prominently displayed outside of the LHC, which stands for Large Hadron Collider. And people wonder, what does that have to do with science? And if you were going to display a some sort of a statue like that, why would it be about destruction? So that makes people nervous. So I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to give that its own video. CERN is located in a place that was once called Apollyon, or Apollyon, which is Greek for destruction. In the times of the Roman Empire, they actually believed that location was the gateway to the underworld, right? And it was also referred to as the pit. Scientists at CERN also refer to black holes as bottomless pits of gravity. They because of everything going on there, then people often point to the book of Revelation. Revelation 9, 1 through 3 says, and the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there came out the smoke locusts upon the earth. So this is St. John referring to a time when Satan is given the key to the bottomless pit to release a horde of demonic beings resembling locusts upon the world. And then the Bible also speaks of Apollyon. And so just the similarities there are, you know, it gets people's attention. So for instance, there was a Wall Street Journal. I always get tongue-tied. They had an article from April of 2016 titled "CERN is seeking secrets of the universe, or maybe opening the portal of hell." And you know, it's the world's largest physics lab. They make antimatter. They observe the God particle, which is the Higgs boson particle. Sorry, I don't know why I'm so tongue-tied today. And they destroy this stuff, hoping that it would unlock the secrets of how the universe was created. But there are scientists who they're cautioning against this. You know, they think it's a bad idea. And sorry, my allergies are killing me. At any rate, CERN is talking about making miniature black holes, and there are various scientists who are like, hey, you know, you shouldn't be doing this. In fact, in 2014, Stephen Hawking, he had a book named Starmus, and he warned that messing with the God particle might destroy the universe. And that was a concern that a bunch of other physicists had too. And their main worry was that even a microscopic black hole could grow and eventually destroy the Earth from the inside out. And so the scientists at CERN were they were telling people not to worry, that, you know, black holes won't destroy the universe. There was another guy, Sir Martin Rees was a British astronomer. He agreed with Hawking, and he was talking about how this is a Pandora's box that could unleash high energy, quote unquote, strange matter. And it's can cause catastrophic vacuum decay that would lead to the collapse of space-time. And, you know, in the Mandela effect, there are people who think that's what's going on, right? That it seems like if you think of the time-space continuum, there's two concepts that come up a lot. One is well, the one is timelines. And a timeline would be like when I woke up this morning, my wife had washed the laundry, and she set out a couple of clean shirts on top of my dresser, and they were sitting next to each other, and one was red and one was black, and I could put on one of them. Well, in this timeline, I chose the red one. But the idea of timelines is that there's another timeline out there where that fat man chose the other shirt. And that every time anybody has sort of a fork in the road, it creates a new timeline where on one you went one way and the other you did the other thing. So one concept is that those could be collapsing in on each other. That Let's say that let's say it's a jersey. I'll make this simple. Let's say it's a sports jersey we're talking about. And one jersey has the number 1 on it, and the other jersey has the number 2 on it, right? Let's say the jersey, the guy who picks jersey 1, let's call his Earth 1. The guy who picks jersey 2, let's call that Earth 2, right? Well, let's say that on Earth 1, the scientists at that CERN erode the building blocks of their universe to the point where it no longer is able to, I don't want to say stand under its own weight because I'm mixing science metaphors there, but it's so unstable, it can't last as it is, right? So the idea is it would sort of think of raindrops on a windshield. Like imagine you're watching 2 raindrops running down towards each other. And then what happens when they touch? They sort of pull into each other, right? Almost like gravity. They pull into each other and form one raindrop. And then that runs down the windshield. Imagine that's what these timelines are doing, so that on Earth 1, you know, something goes wrong, and because Earth 2, they diverged from a single ancestor timeline, right? So especially if it was a recent event, let's say it's, I chose the shirt this morning and today is the day one of the CERNs screws up, right? Those 2 universes have something called quantum entanglement, which means they're related to each other. Okay, think of it that way. They're very closely related to each other. They're like twins. Other timelines out there where maybe the point of divergence was something a really long time ago, thousands of years ago or something, right? That would be more like that timeline isn't your twin, that's like your distant cousin, right? But these timelines where for some reason they're kind of like twins, they're quantum entangled. I'm not sure what the verbiage would be there. Because quantum entanglement is present though, they would be what collapses into each other and forms a single timeline then. A lot of people think that's what we're seeing with the Mandela effect. I mentioned in one of my earlier videos a TV show called Sex and the City, and the title of the show changed. It changed from Sex in the City to Sex and the City. But after the change, people would go and they'd look at things like DVD cases. And when people were posting pictures online of the results, at the time, it seemed like it was about 50-50, right? So there are people that think that when Earth 1 and Earth 2 merge, and let's call this new Earth something like, you know, Earth 1.5, right? When they merge, then the idea is some of the DVDs came from Earth 1, some of the DVDs were from Earth 2, and that's why you have so many examples of both. Now this is all a theory. Take everything with a grain of salt, but this is what some people think is going on that is creating the Mandela effect. I'm gonna tell a quick story, and it's going to sound unrelated at first, but bear with me. So there's a role-playing game company called Steve Jackson Games, and they put out this card game called the Illuminati card game. They put it out in the 90s, but one of the cards was about the attack in New York City on September 11th. One of the cards seems to show Donald Trump as president, right? And people were wondering, well, how could those cards exist in the 90s? Well, it turns out the same company, they made a cyberpunk book, and they got an actual hacker named, I believe his name was Lloyd Blankenship. And they asked him to help write this book, but they wanted the hacking in the book to seem very realistic, and not like far-fetched and campy like it is in some science fiction movies and stuff. So the point is, he had hacked government computers, and the United States Secret Service like stormed the buildings of that company, of the Steve Jackson Games company, and seized all their computers. So we don't know what he saw when he did that. There are people who thinks he saw some kind of plans, where he, the employees of that company were privy to something that was about to happen, right? And put yourself in their shoes. If you knew something was going to happen and maybe you wanted to get the word out or something, how do you do that? If you just tell your friends about it, I think we can all think of scenarios where that doesn't work out so good, right? At any rate, it really looks like they put what they found into those cards. And so the cards predict all sorts of crazy stuff. And then I think if the cards were all, because a lot of people say, well, not every card happened or whatever, or some of the cards are kind of dark humor oriented. I get that. But if they hadn't done that, then people wouldn't have been buying it as a card game. You know what I mean? It wouldn't still be around for someone to notice it and go, hey, wait a minute, right? Maybe I'll do a video about the Illuminati card game. It's pretty interesting, but at any rate. Okay. So there is this other company called Wizards of the Coast. They are the makers of Dungeons and Dragons. Before 2012, I don't know if it was 2011 or 2010, somewhere in there, they made a game called Gamma World. And and I'm trying to kind of do this nutshell versions of things, so I don't want to get too detailed. But the point in Gamma World is they say, they predict that in 2012, CERN is going to do something called the big mistake. And I thought it was really interesting that they mentioned CERN by name. And they say whatever this big mistake is of theirs, it causes different universes to collapse into each other, just like we're talking about. And the result is you've got people from, say, Earth 1 encounter people from Earth 2. In Gamma World, there's a bunch of animals that, let's say these animals were indigenous to Earth 1, but not Earth 2, right? And then the people on Earth 2 see these things, and are like, what the heck is this? And it might be something weird, like it's an animal that's an unnatural color or something of that nature. Well, we're seeing that all the time in real life too. And that's another thing that I could devote an entire video to it. But so a lot of people think that that's what's going on. And I mentioned timelines earlier, but not dimensions. Dimensions are kind of harder to explain. And it's really hard for me to explain the difference between a dimension and a timeline. One take on other dimensions would be like, think of it more like if the universe is infinite in size, then therefore it must contain infinite possibilities. And so, like, Star Trek tried to do it in the 60s on the 60s TV show, but they got it a little bit wrong. On that show, the Enterprise could just fly out into space in a straight line from Earth. And if they fly long enough, eventually they run into another Earth. And it might be an Earth where, like, there's a Roman Empire, like the Roman Empire never fell. So it's like Romans, but they have TV sets and stuff, modern trappings. Or maybe it's a world where there's Nazis there, or maybe whatever, there's some kind of a weird war between like a civil war thing. The problem with how they did it, the writers understood the concept, but when they went to the TV network people, those guys didn't understand dimensions. So they thought it should all just be in the same space. The better example from Star Trek of a dimension is there's this, the normal universe is Captain Kirk is a good guy, that kind of thing, right? At any rate, they introduce this other universe where Captain Kirk is a bad guy and all the heroes are actually villains. And the two versions of the Enterprise, one is a peaceful science exploration kind of a ship, right? The other one is a warship. But the two, they have that quantum entanglement idea. Something goes wrong when Scotty is beaming them up or whatever, and so they switch universes. So the good Kirk is in the evil universe and vice versa. That's a good example of dimensions. That's like that kind of thing done right. So the idea there would be more like, imagine if you had, have you ever seen those drawings where it says find the differences between these two pictures, right? Sometimes I'll see it where it's one side of the page is the one version of the drawing, then the other side of the page is the alternate version of the drawing. And that way you can't look at them side by side. It makes you flip them back and forth to find the difference. Imagine you had the same drawing, like maybe it's a drawing of Earth, but it's an entire book of those. So each page is a different Earth, right? That's kind of like a good metaphor for how dimensions work. Where the idea then with dimension travel would be, what if, imagine if you had like an ant on one of these pages of the book and it wanted to get from one Earth to another. The idea is, imagine you could poke a pinhole in the page that the ant could fit through and come around to the back of the page. You know what I mean? The other dimension. So there are people who then think that what CERN is doing with this portal stuff that they've mentioned is they're poking holes through dimensions. And they've kind of said that because one of the things that we've gotten out of CERN is called a quantum computer. And a quantum computer is, imagine you have a computer tower for like a desktop computer, but it's huge. It's like the size of an old phone booth, right? And it's like a glossy black, smooth, almost like the obelisk from 2001, A Space Odyssey. At any rate, inside of it, I have heard scientists say that they literally poke a little pinhole through the barrier between dimensions. So let's say you have a quantum computer on Earth 1, and you have a quantum computer on Earth 2. Just like you had the two Captain Kirks, right? At any rate. So let's say they ask it a question like, calculate pi. Like, how many digits of pi can you come up with? And so if you ask a normal computer that question, it can go so far. It takes time for it to come up with more numbers and so on and so forth. We can sort of measure the computer's computing power based on how it comes up with pi. When you have two of them, like let's say a scientist on Earth 1 says, calculate pi out as far as you can. Now you've got two computers, and think of it like it's Wi-Fi where they're talking to each other, but they're talking through that little pinhole and the curtain between dimensions, right? Well, now they have twice the computing power, right? To answer your question. Well, here's the thing. It's not just two computers doing it. It's a bunch of them, because now we've got computers on Earth 3, Earth 4, Earth 5, etc. They're all calculating pi together as a network, right? And so the result is much more powerful. So when you start to hear about quantum computing, it's still pretty new. That's what's going on there. As it has been explained to me in tons and tons of videos I've watched about quantum computing. So then one of the concerns scientists have, though, is, okay, like I get the advantage of your computer thing you're talking about, but you're still poking a hole in the fabric of the space-time continuum, right? What happens when you poke a hole in like a shirt? I occasionally snag my shirt on something, and it might even start off as a really small hole, but it just keeps tearing. The ambient threads around the hole, there's a little more there's more force on all of them. They pull apart, the hole gets bigger, it gets to be a problem. So there are people who think this is kind of what a wormhole is, that a wormhole is a hole between 2 points in the time-space continuum. And some people believe a wormhole would be, it would connect, let's say you could have a wormhole on Earth and you could have a wormhole on, say, Mars, and you could just walk through this portal and now you're on Mars. Other people think you could have a wormhole, let's say, on whatever, the White House lawn on Earth 1, and then you have a corresponding wormhole in the same place on Earth 2. Pardon me, allergies. Okay, so now imagine that what CERN has accidentally done is that there are wormholes everywhere, right? Even we mentioned a lawn, right? Imagine you could put on sunglasses, kind of like in the movie They Live, and it lets you have some kind of true sight where you can see whatever's really going on, right? Imagine you just see portals everywhere, right? Let's say there's a guy walking down the street on Earth 1, and like if we're looking at him from a side view, he walks through the portal, and let's say he's wearing a blue hat. But after he passes through the portal, it looks like he's wearing a green hat now. And we would say, well, why is that? Why was there a change? Well, the reason why is the man from Earth 1 walked into a portal to Earth 2 or something, right? But then that portal has a corresponding portal on another Earth, so that somebody from, let's say, Earth 7 has now walked into the exact spot where that guy was, and he was wearing a different hat. And that was one of the reasons the two Earths were divergent. Does that make sense? So what you would get there is, again, a version of the Mandela effect, where something had changed. And now this guy who comes through with his, what did I say, a green hat? He might be from a world where, for instance, let's say green means go and red means stop, right? But now the world he has come to, red means go and green means stop. I've actually seen some people who claimed that was the case, that that's where they came from. Super rare, but I've heard it a couple of times. People have even captured on their phones now, because that's the great thing about cell phones, is we're catching all this stuff we didn't catch before. People are catching on their phones occasionally something like they'll be at a stoplight and they'll see this happening, so they record it and they put it on YouTube. So I think that's very interesting. I've seen pictures of green stop signs, and I'm like, okay, like that's and it could be fake, and that's the downside of all the technology we have at our disposal. Is unfortunately there's a bunch of bad actors in the world, and they are using Photoshop and stuff to kind of ruin it for the rest of us. But at any rate, so that's kind of how the portal thing works. Another thing that could be going on at CERN, though, because we're only talking about science, right? There's a whole other way to look at this. And I almost hate to mention it in a way, but I guess it's, we've been so conditioned to think so poorly of certain ideas. Another way to look at it is more like it's a cult. Imagine that CERN is actually an evil cult, and they are summoning evil beings, like we might call them demons, or fallen angels, or monsters, or whatever, depending on what your views are. You might have a different word for those different concepts. But imagine if this is something more akin to witchcraft, or sorcery, or magic, or whatever you want to call it. Again, your vernacular may vary. Where they're casting some kind of spell to do things, to open portals and stuff of that nature. That would explain why they would have chosen the location they chose, in terms of the history that place had in the times of the Roman Empire. Because like I said, it was a cult back then. And back then, people thought it was an important location, and they referred to it as the pit, and all that stuff. So the bottom line, whatever's going on, we don't really know. Nobody outside of CERN knows what's going on in CERN. CERN whistleblowers have come forward, and they make claims about CERN, but we don't, just like the Photoshop thing, we don't know if they're telling the truth. We don't know if we can trust them. All we can do right now is speculate. So I'll throw it out to you guys. Put in the comments section, what do you guys think is going on at CERN? What do you think is causing the Mandela effect? I'd love to hear from you. And be sure to hit like and subscribe and all that jazz. And I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.